I'm not nervous. I'm not nervous. I'm not nervous. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. My wife was going to travel out here with me, but she decided that it was best for her to stay home. Otherwise, she would be sitting down there shaking her head and saying, well, there's no living with him anymore. It's really good to be back in Evansville. 2 floors of fire on the 30th and 31st floor of a high-rise apartment building, and this is what makes me nervous. Before I get started, I want to thank a few people. Mayor Lloyd Winnicky and his wife Carol, Abigail Whirling, Eric Rentschler, and the other faculty, staff, and students at the University of Evansville. The staff at Tropicana, President Christopher Petroskevich, Tara Barney, Christine Keck. I'm glad you cried, so I don't have to. Kurt Begel, Dr. David Smith, Karen Robinson, Vicki Schmidt, and of course I want to thank the Chief Mike Connolly and the Evansville Fire Department who keep you safe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let's give them a big hand. So yesterday I had an interview with President P, and it was, so I get there and I go up and I said, Mr. President, just tell me how to pronounce your name again. And he looked at me with a confused look on his face and he went, Chris. So as I was thinking about what I would talk about tonight, the lyrics of the song by the Talking Heads kept coming to my mind. Is this my beautiful life? Is this my beautiful wife? How did I get here? Well, over the next 2 hours, I'm going to tell you a story of how I got here. Okay, 15 minutes. I'm going to give you the abridged version and the Cliff Notes version. And just so we're clear about the difference between the two, the way I look at it, the abridged version has the highlights, and the Cliff Notes version has the important parts. When I was a sophomore at Maconaquah High School in Kokomo, I tried football and wrestling. Now, at 105 pounds and getting knocked out by the tackle-matic, football probably wasn't going to be good. And I only had to lose a couple pounds for wrestling, so wrestling it was. One day we were taking a break during practice and we went into the cafeteria where they were having auditions for the school play. While we were sitting in the back commenting amongst ourselves, the director and drama teacher turned to us and said, if you're in here, you're auditioning, and made us get up and audition. So up I went, and the next day I had 4 bit parts in the play. That was the beginning of my theater career. And I am still friends with that high school drama teacher, Kathy Reardon. She is a native of Evansville, and when I was thinking about going to college to study theater, she said, without question, go to the University of Evansville. So that is the only college that I applied to, and thankfully they didn't have as selective an acceptance policy back then as they do now, because I'm not sure I would have made it. My freshman year, I worked in the scene shop as part of one of my classes, and within a few months, the technical director, Todd Engel, asked if I was interested in a paid assistantship. They were going to pay me to do the same thing I was doing already. I had to think about that for about 2 seconds, and that was the beginning of my transition from acting to technical theater. I'm sure John Lutz and Dudley Thomas were very relieved. The next year, they hired a new set designer who would also change my life. Joe Flauto came in and for some reason felt that I had some talent or potential, and he, without doubt, became a mentor for my journey through the rest of college. We then became colleagues and friends and remain friends to this day. Evansville continued to be a part of my life after graduation. After a year of graduate school, I returned to be the technical director and set designer for the Evansville Civic Theater, and then came back to teach at U of E for a year. Joe Flauto intervened in my life again when I had a less than stellar interview with the artistic director of the Hope Summer Repertory Theater in Holland, Michigan. And he had to assure her that I could do the job and I would be a good choice. And that enabled me to meet the person that would change my life forever. My second summer there, I met my would-be wife, now for 34 years, with 2 adult children. Her recollection is a little different than mine. But she says I walked over to the table that she was at in order to talk to another woman who really had no interest in talking to me. So I ended up talking with Kathy, and someday I'll have to thank that other woman. So anyhow, my wife was from New Jersey and had gone to NYU for undergrad and still had an apartment in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So we moved to New York to continue to do theater, and I worked at various theaters around the city, including the New York Shakespeare Festival in Central Park, Second Stage on the Upper West Side, and landed a steady job at a small scene shop in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Then one day, in February of 1987, after we'd moved to Queens to a larger apartment, an apartment without the shower next to the kitchen sink, with a full bathroom and a separate bedroom, there was a manhole fire in the street in front of our apartment at about 9 o'clock at night. The fire department showed up, as they usually do, checked all the surrounding properties, put in a call for the utility company to respond, and when things quieted down a bit, they left, leaving one firefighter to monitor the situation until the utility company showed up. So it's about 10 degrees out on a February night, and this firefighter is standing outside, keeping an eye on a manhole, waiting for the utility company to show up. Not being one to miss an opportunity to talk to someone, I went out and asked, "What's going on?" And if he would like a cup of coffee or something. "Sure," he says. So I make some coffee, head out, and he's telling me about the job. Now, he's the BOP, which is their term for the junior firefighter. He used to be an accountant for Hasbro Toys before he got hired, and he loves being a firefighter. He also tells me that the application for the next test to become a firefighter is that 2 weeks. And you had to apply before your 29th birthday. And the test is only given once every 4 years. I was 28. Now, I didn't know anything about being a firefighter. I didn't grow up thinking, I want to be a firefighter. But I did know that my experience with doing theater from the University of Evansville was different than doing theater in New York. As a technical director at Evansville, I was part of the process of deciding what we wanted to say and what we wanted the audience to experience. Truly a part of the process of how we would affect society. In New York, I wasn't part of that process. I was a carpenter, getting paid $10 an hour, working 50 to 60 hours a week. I think I was looking for a change and a way to affect society again. The next day, I pulled out the New York City telephone book, looked through the blue pages, looking for a number for the New York City Fire Department. Now remember, this is 1987, the time before the internet, in New York. And the idea of being able to call any agency in the city and actually get an answer was pretty slim. So I prepared myself for a long morning, expecting the phone to keep ringing or to be transferred multiple times. I dialed the number, and a guy picks up on the second ring. He asked how he can help me. And I tell him, I'm looking for an application for the firefighters test. He says, and get this, what's your address? I'll mail it to you. Right. Well, he did, and I got it in the mail, filled it out, sent it in. I hang on to that phone number like it's a winning lottery ticket, and I would call up every once in a while and see if there's any news on the test. Well, one time, whoever answers the phone tells me that whatever we know will be in the chief newspaper. And that's the civil service newspaper. It comes out once a week. Great. So I go up to the newsstand, pick up the chief, which came out the day before, check it out. Nothing about the test. But on the back page is a small ad for a preparation class for the FDNY firefighters written test. And it starts that night in Queens. So off I went in the first class, and at the first class, the retired chief that was teaching the class said to do two things to prepare for the test. Read anything and start running. So that was the real beginning of reading for me. Now, I certainly read when I was supposed to, but I would not have called myself a reader until then. Well, 3-ish years later, I got a call and was sworn into the FDNY in August of 1990. And everything was going along fairly routinely until one sunny day in September of 2001. When I was in New Jersey finishing up installing a sliding glass door for my father-in-law, when I found out about the World Trade Centers while we were at a lumber yard. When I got back in the car, I heard the recall on the radio. A long day and night and lots of changes over the next few days included a call on Friday night that I was getting promoted to lieutenant on Sunday. It was originally planned as a private ceremony, no family, no friends. But when I showed up on Sunday morning, it was changed to not only a public ceremony, but a nationally televised event. It was too late to have my wife and 2 small children travel to Brooklyn, and it wasn't going to be the celebration that usually happens with promotions. So they didn't attend, but I did call a couple of Evansville alumni who lived in Brooklyn. John Creech and Susan Knott lived there, and they came and showed up for the promotion ceremony. There were several speeches at the ceremony, and one thing that was said was that we were the future of the FDNY, that we would rebuild the department. Well, I took that to heart, and for the past 19 years, I have done what I could to meet that expectation. After some time down at the Trade Center, I ended up at a firehouse on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and learned a lot from some great senior firefighters. And a couple years later, I got promoted to captain, and after a year or so covering different firehouses, I was assigned to the Lion's Den, Engine 23 in Midtown Manhattan. I remember one of my first fires while I was at Engine 23. It was the middle of the afternoon, and we were assigned to a fire on 57th Street in a hotel on the East Side. The fire was reported on the 16th floor, and we were supposed to be the second engine in. As we were responding, we were getting several reports about the fire, and that the first due engine was going to be delayed. So we got into the address first, and as I walked into the lobby, I noticed there didn't seem to be any lights. We went to the elevator, and lo and behold, the elevators weren't working. It seemed they didn't have any power in the building at all. So we started to walk up 16 floors with all our gear, and luckily on the 12th floor, we had to cross over to another stairs where the standpipe would be for us to hook up the fire hose to put the fire out. This gave us a little break, but when I rounded the last flight of stairs, I could see the fire under the door, and the door was blistering from the heat. Well, now it's time to go to work. The walk-up had played havoc with the other firefighters who were carrying the bulk of the equipment, and I had to piece together enough firefighters from different companies to get the first hand line in operation. We had a whole floor of fire on the 16th floor due to construction, but things went pretty smooth from that point on. This was the first fire I had had with the chief that was working that day. And years later, when I was a battalion chief in the Lower East Side, that chief had been promoted to the chief of the fire academy. And he called me up to see if I would be the chief of probationary firefighter school. The timing was right, and we had developed a great working relationship and respect for each other. So I worked my last day in the firehouse and started my administrative years. I ran Proby School for 2 years and was in charge of training over 1,200 firefighters in those 2 years. Jim, the chief, got promoted again to the chief of training, and he asked me to be his executive officer, which I, of course, said yes to. In less than a year, he was injured while working at a large fire, and a new chief of training was appointed. Now, I had a short relationship with Tom prior to him being promoted to chief of training, and when he took over, he immediately turned to me and said, "You're not going anywhere. You're staying with me." Okay. Well, things were changing rapidly in the upper management of the department right then, and Tom was quickly promoted to the chief of operations. And he informed me then that I was going to headquarters with him. We had a great team, and our relationship was based on trust and respect. So that's the abridged version of how I got to where I am with the FDNY as the executive officer to the chief of operations from a small town in north central Indiana. A journey that Evansville plays a very large part of. But I wouldn't be here if it had not been for the people that have impacted and guided my life over the years. It may seem more like a pinball machine without any clear understanding of how the impact of each person or bumper guides our lives. But had one person not fulfilled their part in the story of my life, I would not be at this point talking to you about a story that seems truly blessed and unbelievable. Had Kathy Reardon not made us get up and audition, I would never have experienced my love for theater. Had she not been from Evansville, I would not have met Joe. Had he not been the teacher, mentor, and friend that he is, I may not have landed that job at Hope Summer Repertory Theater and never met my wife, who had an apartment in New York City. A stranger on a phone, a firefighter in the cold, a life-changing attack, and a focus on being an intentional student of leadership that caught the attention of other leaders. I am who I am because the people that I have met and the way they have interacted with me. The Cliff Notes version of how I got here would probably go like this: Kathy, Joe, John, Dudley, Mary, Julie, Lori, Rick, Teresa, Beth, John, the Evansville bank teller with $5 when my car was out of gas and the check bounced. Stranger on the phone, woman who wasn't interested, Dee Dee, Eileen, Joan, Dave, Jim, Tom, Paul, Brenda, Warren, Leslie, Chris, JJ, Saul, Mike, Dennis, Brian, Rachel, Paul, Jack, Jim, Kathy, Sam, and Peregrine. Will I be listed in the Cliff Notes version of other people's journeys? I don't know. If I am, will it be said with a smile or a frown? I can hope. Will you be in the Cliff Notes of someone's journey? How will you be remembered? Your choice. However you are remembered, you have an impact on people's lives. Whether it's good or bad is up to you. It may be a little, or it may be a lot, but every interaction will change the course of someone's life. How do you want to change someone's life today? How does this organization want to change someone's life tomorrow? Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of my journey and helping define who I will be tomorrow. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hug the ones you can.